Ring sizing might be the most common repair that you'll do. In this video, we'll look at sizing down a ring, making a ring smaller. So first we need to make sure that the culet of the stone, if there is a stone, doesn't poke out at the bottom. If it does poke out, you need to be very careful and not put it on a regular mandrel or you will chip the culet. You need to use a groove mandrel or a culet mandrel that has a groove all along so you can push down the ring and measure the correct size while protecting the stone's culet. Otherwise, use your regular mandrel, push down the ring, and look to see if your ring is round. If the ring is not round, it'll be a little bit harder to read the size, but if hopefully the ring is round, you can go ahead and read the size. We read in the middle of the shank or in the middle of the band, not the edge, unless you're working for a company that uses the leading edge. So as long as you know who you're working for, meaning you're speaking the same language, then it's fine to do either, although definitely most commonly we read the middle of the band for the size. This will help if you're sizing a wider ring. You will read the true size by reading the middle of the band. It's never a bad idea to flip your ring, especially if it's a wider ring, to make sure that you're reading the same size on both sides. If the ring is not round, then you may have to estimate a little bit how it would sit if it was round. In this video, I'll show you how to size down by one size. But before, we need to find out if there was any previous sizing done on this ring. So without any protectant on the surface, we will put it on our brick and put a very, very, very sharp oxidizing flame, and we will just go over the metal really quickly to see any solder line appearing or lack of. You don't want to heat up this ring very much at all because the stone is not protected. It's just a very quick pass and your flame must be very sharp to oxidize. In this case, there's no obvious lines. It would be a very clean line, very clear line showing. So here we don't have any lines. So I quickly rubbed off with a little bit of sandpaper to remove my oxidation so I can start sizing down. So I like to mark my center with my saw, the center of the bottom of the ring, and I will be marking on both sides the amount to size down. If the ring had previously been soldered, I would just make sure to include that and remove the previous solder so we don't have to add, in the end we don't end up with a bunch of solder lines, so we want to remove the previous solder. One size equals 2.5 millimeters, always, doesn't matter the width of the band. So if you're sizing down one size, you can pick 2.5 millimeters. And of course, if you do sizing a lot, you don't even have to measure. You will know what one size looks like, or half a size or a quarter size. But if you don't do it too often, that's all you have to remember. One size is 2.5. If you need to size down by half a size, you will half that by 2. And if you're sizing down a quarter size, then you just do 2.5 divided by 4, and that's your quarter size. Here with my 2.5, I'm marking on both sides of the ring, both sides of my lines at the same time. The other option is to divide your 2.5 in 2 and use that center line to guide and mark on both sides. That way your line is marked nice and straight if you need that extra guideline. So you divide your 2.5 in 2 and mark on both sides of your line. And then we'll be cutting that away, and we will have one size down. We will be removing one size. You can saw on your peg or you can saw on your cutting board. It doesn't matter which one. We just do a little bit, not all the way on one side, and then we do a little bit more on the other side. That way there's no wobble when you're sawing the piece away. Again, if you prefer on your saw board, that's fine. Just don't go all the way on the first cut. Just leave a little bit attached, and then it will help when you switch to the other side, so the two sides of the rings don't wobble. This doesn't matter so much on a wide or thick band like this, but when you're sizing down a very delicate ring, if the two are detached, they can really start wobbling, and the ring can be quite unstable, especially if it's a very old ring. So you want to connect them for as long as possible. And there's your little piece left. Usually clients don't want the little piece back, or you don't give it back unless a client asks, because people don't want to hang on to these little bits. So you put that in your scrap, your gold scrap. And then we take our half round pliers, and with leverage we push down, starting as close to the top of the ring as possible. If it's too difficult, you can use your bending pliers or bow bending pliers. But as much as possible, use your half round, because you can get higher beside the center, the solitaire, the center of the ring, the stone. So you can start bending from higher up, which is important for the shape of the ring. So you want to start bending and closing the two sides as close to the top as possible, and then work your way down. Also adjust side to side, because things shift, and you need to have a perfect match for this, because after soldering we'll be filing a little bit, and we don't want to create a thinner or a narrower ring for the client. So the fit is very important here. So take your time to bring the two together to have a very good fit. At this point you can check if you're on the right track on your mandrel. You can't push down very much, of course, it's not soldered, but you can have a look and see if you're on the right track and if you've done everything correctly. When soldering the ring, you need to protect your metal, or especially if there's a stone, your stone, if it's a stone that can take the heat. So you want to use your boric acid and alcohol protectant on the surface, and then proceed with soldering with using hard solder. Ring sizing is always done with hard solder. That way you will have a joint that is invisible. If you use easy solder, this may come back to you because the ring reopened or cracked at the solder seam, or it will be visible. We need to have a product that does not look like it was sized at all. If your ring that you're sizing has stones that cannot tolerate any heat, so like peridot, amethyst, garnet, you need to protect those stones by putting them underwater. There are many methods of doing this. You can buy products called different products like Cool Jewels, or you can make your own product. Like some people use, I've even heard of using a potato, or using paper towel or toilet paper wrapped in water. There's many different ways, but to me the best way is just to simply use water and have your stones just below the surface of the water. That way you can see what's happening. So if you're using a product that starts to dry out, you can't see and your stone might be burning. As if you're using water, it's simple, it's around, and you can see. So for this, use a bowl that is metal. An old can or an old tin will work. Don't use a ceramic or glass bowl in case it shatters. So just use the metal bowl, and you just hook it with your third hand and you hang your ring so that only the stone is underwater. So even lifted like I'm doing right now, the tension surface lifts up and stays, and your stone is buried underwater. Prepare your solder, and for this method I'm going to use PIG soldering because the flame has to be much hotter and sharper and stronger because of the water working against us. So because of all of that big flame coming, if I place my solder it'll fly away. So for this method I think PIG solder is much more appropriate. And here is my flame. It is a bigger and sharper flame, as I was saying. It's quite strong, especially because in this case I'm doing a silver ring. So if doing a gold ring underwater like this, it's much easier because gold doesn't transfer the heat as much. Silver is a great heat conductor, and what that means is that heat that you're applying on the top is transferred to the rest of the ring and transferred to the water. So you're really creating a little kettle and heating up the water. So for that reason, you have to compensate and go against that to get the top of the ring hot enough to flow your hard solder. So if doing a silver ring, you'll need a much bigger flame. If doing a gold ring, this is actually a lot easier than this. It looks like I'm touching the ring with the tip of my flame, but I'm not. It's just so red and it's hard to see. I am very close though, and it again is really hot flame to get that solder to flow onto a silver ring. So now the solder went, so I can stop and let it cool. It cools really fast because of the water. And then I will go and pickle and finish by filing and sanding and repolishing. Whichever method was used to solder, regular or underwater. After pickling, we're going to inspect, make sure we have enough solder everywhere, and then we're going to work inside out. So the inside first and then out. We need to make sure that this ring goes back to perfectly round. So we need to first remove any solder lump on the inside, if any, with your half round file or your inside ring burr. And then we're going to put this on the mandrel and not only see if we're at the right size, but make the ring perfectly round. So use your mallet to tap this to round, and hopefully you're very close to your size. You can use a rawhide mallet or nylon. Hopefully you're very close to the size because you've measured properly. If you're a little bit tighter, you can use a metal mallet and ever slightly tap it to enlarge it. If it is too big though, you will have to recut. Every time you pass the saw is about 1/8 of a size, so be careful. So my ring is now almost round, so I'm going to keep working on it to have a round ring. And only when I have a round ring can I continue cleaning the rest. If you clean the outside first and then you go back on the mandrel and it's not round, then you'll have to tap it round and then go back and file again, and you'll end up with a ring that is narrower or thinner than when the client brought it in. So work inside out, make sure it's perfectly round, and then continue the rest. So file on the side as little as possible, not to change the ring shape and width. So as little as possible with a fairly fine hand file, and to preserve the width. And of course filing on top as little as possible again to preserve the thickness. And after this is done, you're going to sand the inside with your barrels, sand the sides and the top, and go to the polisher and repolish as you normally would.